checked it all. I was like, well, it all makes sense. So it's not perfect, but it's okay. Yeah. So now I'm just looking back and see if I get formulas I use, and I want them down and check out this. Yeah. And then I'll just kind of review some this afternoon.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get us rolling here. We're going to work on Chapter 12 today, the lunches database there. So want to we'll move on to it. And you'll want to grab the Patrick files and get those. And of course, you should have SQL Fun. I think I've got the obvious on my desktop, and then we'll be working with the text file from Chapter 12. So again, I'm going to scoop my warehouse out there, and then I'll open up and we'll go work on the code for Chapter 12. And at this stage of the game, and as I mentioned it on Tuesday, we're working through the column functions, and here in over in 12, we're going to do some more work with columns, a little bit more extensive work. And if you take a look over, and you ought to have the textbook open always to kind of follow along. And if you take a look there at page 437, you'll see that they walk you through that process of summarizing groups of data within a column. So we're still working with aggregates, but now we are essentially working with subtotals, and they give us a depiction of that graphically, and then grouping those rows and then summarizing those groups. So that's that process whereby we basically get subtotals. And again, we're just working towards the process of being able to build that analytical cube. And I think I have that file in here, but I want to just go ahead and make sure. I want to talk about it again to emphasize it. And here it is. There's an old friend. I'll open this up. This is the analytical cube. Now, again, and you have it on your machine, so you should be able to see fairly well. The analytical cube is essentially, this could be a depiction of a database, a data warehouse, a data mart. But what it also represents for us is why we use databases in the first place. What's the point of them? And if you take a look again, you'll see we've got some dimensions. We've got a product dimension. We have these different products, and I'm right here. And let me see. I'm going to do yield annotate thing. And I think I'll spotlight the mouse so you can spotlight it. There we go. And you can see, here's the product. And then each of those product types, that's a dimension. Then we have another dimension down here, and this is the retailer, the type of retailer, the outlet. All right? And then we have some data, and those would be fact tables those would be fact tables, okay? And then we have a series of queries that we can ask about the data. And you can see each of those different colors represent a different type of query or a different type of data that we have in that array. And when you hear people use the term data mart, data warehouse, database, think of them in progressively larger terms. A database is usually dedicated to just one thing. And the terms are used so interchangeably with data warehouses and databases, it's kind of hard to delineate. But then you hear the term data mart, and a data mart typically is a very, very specialized database. And think of it like you go to the big Walmart and the small Walmart, okay? Now, there's a new term that's out there, and people are talking about it, and it's a term that people use, what they call the data lake. And the data lake is a combination of structured data that fits inside of a table quite readily that we can work with, and what we call unstructured data. And unstructured data would be tweets, likes, product recommendations, Yelp, location data, anything that just doesn't fit within the number of followers that somebody has, the network of followers that somebody has in Twitter. All of those are examples of data that don't necessarily fit into a table, so we have to handle them a little bit differently to get them into a tabular form. A lot of unstructured data are also just simply data whose format, although they were in tables of some kind, the format is so antiquated that you almost literally have to reinvent it so that you can work with it. Or maybe it's embedded in programming language that now is almost extinct. And you'll find if folks who work with government data run into that a lot. Well, again, the analytical cube is where we're headed with all of this. And as you can see, all of the different queries that we can work with, of course, have date there as a dimension. And this would just really be the start. Now, you've heard me say before, the idea of the KPI, okay, the key performance indicators, that's the stuff at a given level of management that make up the primary elements of a dashboard, okay? And let me give you a real quick example, and I'm gonna turn this little spotlight thing off. And I'm going to open up a new tab, and let's go over to the New York Times. As you're going to see a real interesting dashboard. And we'll pop over there, and we're going to look at for a moment at some of the data that's been provided in terms of Hurricane Michael. Okay, now what you're going to see here on their front page, since it's front page news, is almost really like a dashboard of sorts. And you can see these these photos, and these are really like a form where if you click, then it's basically you've done a query to find out something about the storm in pictures, who's counted, all of that stuff. Here's another. So they provided you almost for their readers a dashboard of sorts based upon what they think would be of interest to them. Okay. Now, and they have, of course, this is yet another one of those using a video. So they're kind of providing you a mixed media presentation, and this is for the readers of the Times, but it's a dashboard nonetheless, because these are things that they think are going to be of interest to people. Here's more of those deeper types of stories that talks about, why did we underestimate the power of the storm? And they did a very, very good job in terms of identifying where it was going to come on shore. They did a great job of identifying how it was going to track out. But what scientists and whole thousands of people working on this missed was the ferocity of the storm. And so that'll probably take them back to their drawing boards saying, okay, when we fly an airplane into the middle of one of these things, what other data do we need to get? Or did we misread sensors or whatever? Because this is probably one of the first times that they have underestimated to a great extent the power of the storm. Tracking them is one thing. And tracking the storm, and if you went to Weather Channel or where you saw as the storm tracked upwards, that provides for people, for example, responders, it provides them a means by which to say, okay, how do we deploy our resources before we go in and try to work with people, etc. Okay, so I wanted to show you that so you can understand the idea of a dashboard is more than just for the manager, it's also for a customer. And in this event, in this case, it's for the people who are customers in the New York Times who are really into the coverage of this and want to take a deep dive into some of the science, others that are more interested in seeing some of the video, others who want to see some human interest stories, and the editors of the online edition of the New York Times sit down and they make those decisions in terms of what they think that their readers, the eyeballs, are going to want. Now, again, I can't emphasize enough that when we see these elements in our business, we start to understand that why it's so important for us to be able to harvest this data, to go down and drill down and more importantly, frame the right questions, okay, in terms of what we're going to do. So chapter 12 just takes us along that process as we start to work towards a point where we'll be looking at pivot tables, where we're doing a multidimensional search. And if you see the cube, you can note the cube is multidimensional. It's just not a simple XY axis. And so when we start to see the data in that way and we start to understand, and that's the point where the law of large numbers takes over, meaning the more data I collect about my business, typically, the better I'm going to understand my business. And the better I'll come to a point where I say I can hone my questions much better. And I know what to ask about, what to be concerned about, etc. So we'll close this off here. We'll just go back here for a sec, okay? And that's the analytical cube. So I want to jump over here we're over in the modules, and just keep us in terms of, keep us on track also in terms of how we're doing. Now, obviously this is week 7, and today's the 11th, so we've been working ahead, all right? And again, I provided you folks some resources or things to take a look at that feel like, well, I know they show you a great example of how we use a database and to do something good. And these are folks who are into conservation, tagging animals, etc. Databases enable us to do that, to track their movements with tags, and so we understand their habitat, where they go, and that enables us to try to save them, okay, and to take care of them. Because when we lose a species, it's gone, and we are losing species of all types, particularly plants, all of the time. A lot of people don't know it, but down the Amazon jungle is in many ways like the lungs of planet Earth, because trees take in carbon dioxide. We need oxygen. And the more of that air, more of that land that's burned off, because it's typically how they don't go in and just, when folks want to take 100,000 acres, they just set it afire. And then they go in, they pull out the stumps of the branches and they start to plow. That's how they do it. That's why you'll hear you'll hear the term slash and burn agriculture, because that's typically what happens in emerging countries, excuse me. Also wanted to show you this graphic search, which is an interesting little resource. And what it does, let's see if it's going to load up for me today. Play nice. Maybe is or maybe not. Well, I'm going to mess. I don't want to waste your time with that. While we're going back here for just a minute, maybe if you get the call up, that'll be to pop up and ring for you. That'll be good. But one of the interesting. Let me talk for a moment about an experience that I had yesterday. Okay, I ordered some stuff from Walmart. All right, online. Now, I have the copy of the order, and somewhere in their e-commerce store, or they got the wrong order, so they sent us the wrong stuff. Okay, now if they had a really good operating e-commerce store that would check inventory versus what I ordered, or if they had sent the stuff to me and said we sent this as a substitute, I might have been okay. But now I'm not so okay, because I ordered the stuff from them and they sent me the wrong stuff. They made a substitute, which I didn't authorize them to do. Now, if I quit purchasing from them, I don't know what I would spend over my lifetime, but if I tell 25 or 50 people, I had a bad experience with Walmart online, then they're not going to do business with them, a large portion of them. And brand loyalty and changing people's brand loyalty is very, very difficult. But when I have one of those circumstances occur, there's somewhere in that chain that something happened. And who knows, maybe in the order picking process, who knows, maybe the ticket read wrong. When we looked at the invoice was correct, but the product was not. So there was a problem there in terms of the delivery. Now, that's not that big of a deal, but what if it had been something very, very important to me or something that I really needed? I'm certainly not going to trust them to handle any medical supplies for me in the near future. Now, week 8, we've got fall free days, and I gave you really no assignments there, but I gave you some interesting types of resources to take a look at, okay? And I think probably the 2 of those I think are of the most practical value to you. I think this is kind of a fun one to look at. I think this one, and there's a link over there. You may have to follow a second link because the permalinks on these get a little bit sketchy. But I think this one is probably one of the more interesting and maybe one of the more important links. Now, we're coming, for example, to a point where we ask ourselves, okay, how is my business spatially aligned? Let me give you an example. I've got 13 people here today. I have a significant number of people who are not here. So I'd love to have a GPS locator so I could see where they are. I'd love to see that. And those of you who aren't here at class, I hope wherever you are, it was worth your time and energy. And at a certain point, we're going to see this. There's one institution out west that on its online programming literally tells students, we have to have your phone GPS so we know where you are. So when you take an exam, we know you're at one of our exam sites. Now, to you and I, that's a little creepy, but hey, that you already get ID numbers. And they already monitor everything. When you come in the network, they monitor everything, okay? And as an employee, I know when I return my computer to them, they take it apart to see if I'm still selling booze online or looking at dirty movies or anything like that. Mine probably gets the most going over of any of them. But to make a long story short, we're seeing a revolution in the way that we look at businesses from a location or a spatial way. Okay. Now, it's my job to tell you that's what's out here in 5 years. It's my job to present you the material. It's not my job to motivate you because the kind of money you pay to go to school here, if you're not motivated, I hope you're independently wealthy or you're getting a full ride on a scholarship. So there are no fall free days here, but I have some resources for you to go take a look at that I think are interesting. Then, of course, we're down into week 9, and this starts with the very first of the Sharda text in those business intelligence texts, and that's that chapter 1 exercise with Teradata University Networks Sports Analytics. So you'll need to go over to Teradata and get registered over there if you're not. And I'm going to go over here to Vital Source and pull up the textbook, and away we go. All righty. I know what I did there. I have selective memory for this website. I always sign in wrong. There we go. Now the Sharda text, I'm going to pop up here. This is the business intelligence text I'm talking about, okay? And over, there's an assignment there for you. On chapter 1, where they're going to have you take a look at the Teradata University Network Sports Analytics. Now, let me explain to you just for a moment about what Teradata University is if you haven't had a class with me before. This is operated primarily by a group of folks out of Oklahoma State University, and it provides me and all of you free access to some tools like SAS Visual Analytics, Oracle, other types of database and search tools that you would not be able to, the school couldn't afford the license. So we're able through them, because their industry partners have said, okay, we'll provide you access as long as people log in and all this. And the whole point of the thing is it's a try it and buy it kind of thing. And they know that someday you'll run a company or you'll work for somebody and you'll be asked about, well, what would be a good tool to use? And you'll say, well, here's what I've used in the past, et cetera. So it's that type of thing. So you'll want to go over to Teradata University and register, I believe, University Network. I believe I think the password is still analytics. If it's not, I'll pop over there and find out. But you'll want to get registered for that, because you're gonna be doing that. You're gonna be doing that exercise. In fact, the Charter text probably gives you some information on how to get over there. I think they do. Now, I'm going to open up, and this is a chapter 1 exercise. So, table of contents, and we'll go down to the contents page, and we'll go down to chapter 1. And here what they're trying to do is give you an overview of what we talk about in terms of business intelligence. Business intelligence, for all intents and purposes, is really 2 things. One, using data and information to figure out how to have and improve upon operational excellence. So one piece of it is internally focused. The second is more externally focused in saying, what does the world look like out there? What's going on in our industry? And typically, it'll work the usual kind of external sweep, the broader socioeconomic patterns that are going on, our industry, our key competitors, and there are really 2 models that are used. And if you've taken the policy course or you've taken some of the other courses, there are 2 models. One is what we call the SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we analyze our company in terms of those. The other is the Porter model, where we look at the 5 forces. For example, the relative strength of suppliers. How much power do my suppliers have? How easy is it for my customers to switch brands? Both of those are the dominant models and thought processes. Now, in some senses, to me, they both kind of look like what I would call nature and nurture. There are some companies who say, we have the best people in the world, we work together better than anybody, that's our competitive strength. There are other people who say, we own the licenses and the patents and the algorithms, we've got the best soup, they will come because we've built it. Okay, and you're going to run into this, especially as you go up through management into the ranks, or if you own a company. If you own a company especially, there will always have to be in your mind the question of, what is my value proposition? That is, why would somebody pay me to do what I do? Okay? A long time ago, a friend of mine and I, who we've collaborated on a lot of research, at the dawn of the internet, we realized that there were going to be these things called domain names, like .okbu, .com, and Oklahoma Baptist at OKView or whatever. So we decided to arbitrage those. And what we would do is we'd go to the domain, the DNS, the domain naming service, and we'd do searches. And we'd find everyone that was we'd do a search. We'd say, is there a jcpenney.net? No. And it was $50 to buy them. Okay. We did this for about a year. And when those people in usually larger firms would find out that someone owned it, we'd get a nasty letter. And it would come from the attorney saying, this is a trademark infringement and blah, blah, blah. It was nothing of the sort. Everything we did was legal. There was nothing wrong with what we did. The only problem we had is we couldn't find an attorney who'd fight it out in court. And we didn't have the money to pay the attorneys. So when they'd say, we'll give you $5,000 for the domain name, we said, where do we sign on? And we did that. We were domain squatters, okay? So I learned early on, if you've got a value proposition and you have a niche, you're good to go. And they'd send us all these nasty letters, and they're gonna hang us by our thumbs and sue us for millions of dollars, and I'd just laugh, and I'd write them back or send them an email and say, how much do you want? How much will you pay us? And it was usually some small dinky sum, which was not even worth anywhere near what it was, but they just wanted, we were a nuisance, okay? We were like, well, you go to the zoo and see an elephant, and it gets fleas, and it goes whap, and we were a flea, okay? It's because we didn't have the money to fight it, but it worked for a while. It was big fun. So that issue of business intelligence and the value of this sharded text is to help us understand how we look at those key performance indicators and those key external indicators, and we use the technology to do that. And so this case here, we'll look at sports analytics. And if you're a sports fan of any kind, you can't watch today without seeing a tremendous amount of analytics. In fact, I'm a baseball fan. And when I go see a baseball game live, okay, after about 2 innings, I'm going, I don't know what's going on. And they have stuff on the scoreboard and it's incomplete. I'm used to sitting at home having someone feed me the information, telling me, oh, here's what's going on, and here's so-and-so, and with 2 people on, and one of them is from Venezuela, he hits 458. I can't get that at the stadium. Okay, now if they had tablets everywhere, I probably could. So I truly, as I started to go, the real draw for me to go now is to go up into the food court and go, I'm having Chinese food at a baseball game. When I was 12 years old, I never thought I could do this. Okay, or looking for Fred Bird to see if he was there to get it. We're like this. We're Twitter friends. I follow him on Facebook. I've seen him at Busch Stadium about 3 or 4 times. He says, I say, hey, it's Keith. What's going on? And Fred Bird incredibly says, good to see you again, Keith. So we're like this. But the analytics are incredible. And so I wanted you to see that because it's crept even into that sphere in just about any sport now today. So I think it's a good case study for you to go and take a look at. And I'll be interested to see what your responses are on those. Okay, all of that being said, we're going to work on Chapter 12. So I'm going to diminish this down for just a second. And I'm going to go back to our warehouse. Okay, and here it is. I've got this little backup thing. I'm going to go ahead and use this instead. And I'm going to open it up. Now you say, you keep calling this a warehouse. Why do you call it a warehouse? Well, it's pretty simple. If you look over here to the left in the shutter bar, and let's just look at just the tables, you'll see all of these dimension tables. You say, what do you mean by that? Well, let's open up the table of departments, and that is intuitively the most obvious. Back in 1123, when we built some drop-down menus and we created those, we went down and we went down into the properties field, and then we went over and used a query to populate a field with a drop-down menu. We were using dimension tables to do that, to make the input of the data more intuitive and easier. Well, this is a dimension table, and the dimension is departments. Okay? I've got a department code. I have the department name. All right? And so what we do is we use the dimension tables to provide a context for the factual data that we collect. Does that make sense? Okay. So if I go into a database and I see their dimension tables, and typically they're going to be like these, where there'll be just a table with some fields, but no data. I pretty much start to have a good idea of how information and money and work flows within a company. Now, the bigger the company, the more you have to go and work with the enterprise software and take a look at it to see, okay, here's everything that deals with, if they're a manufacturing entity, here's everything that deals with the manufacturing, here's everything that deals with their supply chain and all their vendors and where they ship things, etc., and then management and HR types of things. So you'll see a multiplicity of these. And enterprise computing says, how do I tie all that stuff together to make sure that things talk to each other? Well, this is obviously a dimension table. Here's one for employees. And again, this is important because now we've got a little bit of data in here, okay? And what we've done is we've mixed really a couple of dimensions, and we've kind of created what I would call a semi-fact table. If you take a look, you're going to see employee ID, first name, last name, department code, then the hire date, which is a number for all intents and purposes, the credit limit, which is a number, the phone number, and the management code, which is really not a number, but more, it's a categorical number, and a nominal. It's nominal data. Okay, so we've got these. We have these dimensions here, and then if you click, let's click for a moment on the queries. All right, and I have some staple standard queries here. Now you have these numbers queries, and we've got a sales staff view, and we've got some things we've created, but we've got these constant, what we call slowly changing dimension types of queries, and they're really just there as a device, like a template, and to do some mathematical work. And the author wants to see this, and you're not always going to see this in a business database, but he wants to show you these because there are some times when you'll have something that will come close to that. And the next thing I want to look at are forms. All right, and we have an employee entry form. Now, if we click on the employees table, and I decide I'm going to add a record, you could see that after a while, this can become exceptionally tedious, all right, and fraught with problems unless I've done the work in creating it. Now, go down to the design view on the table, and let's see how well we did that. Well, we're at the employee name, and can anybody tell me, what tells me here, do I get a visual cue that this is a primary key? Okay, I get the key. And what that means is this is a unique identifier, okay, that makes sure that every record is unique. We don't want duplicate records. We don't want them at all. You said, well, what about someone who comes and buys from you every week? Well, I'm going to have a primary key that will make sure that every one of those transactions is dealt with as a unique transaction. Now, there's going to be a point where I'm going to want to use these aggregate functions that we're going to look at here in Chapter 12 to summarize, i.e. really to subtotal those, so we can kind of say, what do we do this month, next month, etc. It's always good to remind ourselves of these thoughts until it becomes almost second nature or intuitive with you. Now, for you, all of you, you're going to be working at the design view with these things when you run the queries. So the thoughts, the longer you work for somebody, the more it's going to become apparent to you, because every business and every industry is very different. We try to just kind of say, okay, here's how to drive. Here's the brake. Here's the accelerator. When you put on your blinker, when you turn, you see a stop sign, you see a yield sign, etc. And from then on, it'll be a matter of how well you do and how much people think of you. And at a certain point, if they let you drive the Lamborghini, you've arrived. If they continue to have you driving the old 1992 Ford pickup, they probably is a message you should either move on or do something radically in terms of your employment situation. And that's the best and nicest way I know how to put that. Well, let's click on the all objects, okay? And we're going to be ready to mess with that. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work on this first batch. So let's diminish this down. And I've got find my text file there for chapter 12. I threw it here somewhere, I thought. There it is. As usual, what I like to do is walk you through the flavor of it to give you some context so you're not just inputting code. That doesn't do you much good. Seeing the code is good for you in the sense of, I think it kind of helps build some of your critical thinking skills, and I think it also helps solidify for you how this stuff works. Now, here in 12.2, and that's going to be over on page 439. Okay, now one of the things the author does, and the reason I like this text is he shows you the beginning object, that is the table, and he shows you the result set, and that is the view or the query the result set that you create. And here in 12.2, we should have been doing this long enough that if I could ask you, okay, what table am I getting these data from? What table am I working with? Does it give me a cue to tell me what table I'm working with? The employee table, because it says from employees. Do you see how incredibly difficult that was? I'm not sure you could understand it or master it. Now, I'm being facetious. I'm being facetious for a reason. Many of you don't know it, but you probably are a computer scientist and you have one inside of you trying to get out. Some of you have an analytics specialist trying to get out. Some of you probably have an accountant trying to get out. They're in there, okay? And again, the wonderful thing about all this is it's not that difficult. It really just isn't. And it was designed, all these computer systems and languages are designed in a way so that they're very linear in the way they work. It's one, and here, once you've seen this code, it should be a bore to you by now, but you can basically see now. And I know, okay, I know the table I'm working with, and I know I've got some functions here. Count, minimum, maximum. Am I using a column alias? Am I? Yes or no? And how would I know if I am or not? A column alias. Well, I am. Every time I see as, okay, see, your head could go AKA, also known as number of employees. Follow? Why would I use a column alias? Because on the output, I don't want to signal the real name of my fields. It's a security thing. Secondly, it might be more discernible or understandable by the end user. Ultimately, this has got to make sense to a human being who looks at the report, or you take this stuff and you blast it over into over into Excel. You build a pivot table, or you build a pivot chart, or you just use a regular charting device of some type, or use conditional formatting. It's got to make sense to somebody. So we'll often take tables that are named by a DBA or something like that, and we'll change them, or we'll mask the real name with something like as number of employees, which is more understandable. Okay. Now, some highly security conscious organizations will do this. Every single table will be given a random number. They have a random number generator, and you assign a random number to it, and then someone knows the secret code and knows what that's all about. Okay, and as you work with the dashboard, you get ready to run the queries or whatever you're going to do, it'll populate that name for you, but you couldn't hack it because you don't know the names of the fields. If you don't know the names of the fields, you can't get data out of them. You've got to know that. So we've got this manager ID, and this is 12.2, and we have the count function. Then we have the minimum in terms of credit limit and the maximum in terms of credit limit. And we're getting it from the employees table. So this is the first piece of this, and I'm going to highlight this right here. So you see, this is our first stop. Now we start to work on the subgroups, the subtotals. And you'll see these next 3 lines of code. First of all, we start filtering. Where not. So what does that mean? Where not means where it's anything but, okay, 202. Right? Where not, anything but 202. And then notice we see another term, group, okay? And we're going to group it by manager ID, which is a subgroup, and then we're going to order it. You follow me? What we did. Now, you'll have, when you're at work, you won't be having to write, you'll have a drop-down menu of some type, or you'll have some of these subgroups or dimensional concepts that you can just plug in and pull that stuff out. One of the things that makes mapping such an exciting tool for us out there in business is that folks who are cartographers who are used to working with a base map, and then they build on it. And if you want to see an example of that, go out to the Living Atlas, and it will show you a base map of the world or anywhere you want, and then you can just add layers to it. And you just start to see everything populate. And then you could strip a layer away, or you can have whatever combination of layers that you want to get. To me, one of the most interesting things I've ever seen, I'll never forget it the first time I did it, was I said, okay, I went out to see what does planet Earth look like at night from space? Okay, have you ever thought about that? Huh? No, not really. Well, give it some thought, because you're there standing looking up, okay, and there's a space, there's some type of there's a satellite, okay, that's looking down at you. And so I said, okay, I want to see what it looks like. And when we went over the Korean Peninsula, it was striking. The northern part was dark, a few lights. The southern part was lit up like a Christmas tree. And I thought, the people in North Korea literally live in the dark. Literally. Okay? Now, despite the fact that I think he's got a really cool haircut, okay, and he's a fan of NBA basketball and a fan of Oklahoma's own Dennis Rodman. How do you know Dennis Rodman, Oklahoma? Yeah. Kim Jong-un can be kind of a mean guy. When you get mad at your uncle and you use an anti-aircraft weapon to shoot him to bits, you may have an anger issue. Okay? But I was struck by how dark it is. How dark it is. And I went back in time. I said, can I look at some stuff in time? And I looked at China. And I looked at China in 1960, and it was about as dark as North Korea is now. And then somewhere around 1975, 1980, 85, the coast starts to light up. Now, I was doing some searches, wasn't I? I was running some queries. And by the time I got to 2015, you could see this whole band of light that followed the shoreline of that country. And in 25 or 30 years or whenever, the whole thing will be lit up. It's just a matter of time. Well, we've got this little query. Let's go ahead and paste it, and we're going to run it. All right. And so we'll come over here, and we'll open up and we'll get rid of these two, and we're going to click create. And we'll click query design, and we'll close it off, SQL, and we're going to run the query. Oh, okay, so it wants me to close it off. All right. Close it off. It's not going to let me play with it unless I close it off. So now let's see what we got. And I'm going to see the data sheet view. And I'll just pop these out here to get the manager ID. And the maximum. Okay. Now from there, I might have some other analysis that I want to do. I might be comparing departments. I might be looking at, in terms of which department might have the highest amount of maximum of credit out there that we extend. Who knows? This is a small example. I know it's not very impressive, but if you get 5,000 of these cases, then and that's going to be typical, several hundred or maybe a couple of thousand or so. You'll throw them over into an analytic engine, that is, say, into an Excel, and you'll use them. Or if you're using something like SAS, Visual Analytics, or SAP, or one of those programs, you'll be able to go ahead and do the number crunching as well as the database. The holy grail for all of this is the ability to do three things. One, use it like a database, use it like a spreadsheet, and then add mapping too. There's a tool out there, and I want to show you real quickly. Maybe you've worked with it, I don't know. So let's go back up online, and let's open up a new tab real quickly, all right? And I don't know if you've ever used it or not, but it's called Tableau. And this is an open software. And you can download it and play around with it if you got your own machine at home. But this is the open source product, and they provide you a way to pull data up and handle them like you're in a database, then handle them like you're in a spreadsheet, and then also that has a mapping function, which is a really nice little tool. Now you could do some mapping with Excel, for example. There's some websites out there that will take an address that's in an Excel file, you cut it and paste it, throw it in, and it'll give you a kind of a map. Nothing really fantastic, but nonetheless worthwhile to see. Okay, so we've run, we'll go back here and take a look, all right? And we've run this first query. This is 12.2. Okay, and what I'm trying to do is to give you kind of a flavor of each of these. And here again, we've got these groups, all right? And we've grouped them by the manager ID. And here we have one where they don't have an ID, and we got that issue of a null problem again. Okay, so they give us this beginning tables, and the authors there at the bottom of page 439 show us when we apply the where clause. Okay, and then they walk us through at 440. Where we apply, they're divided into groups on the manager ID, and then we get the result table. So they kind of let you see each table as it's created. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Okay. 12.3 is worth taking a look at. And let's just go ahead and throw the code in there, and we'll run it. And we're going to, before I do that, let's save this one. And this is going to be 12.2. Now, let me say this. Loading up what we do here for workshop credit, and I'll throw something up there too, is one thing. My hope is that you'll do some exploration and go a little bit deeper, although I'm trying to kind of give you a flavor of each of these types of queries that we run, because when we're working with subgrouping, there are just some standard ways that we get that accomplished. But over in 12.3, let's go ahead and run that. And I want to copy that. And since I've got it out here to let you see, again, we're going to get the department code, account, a minimum, a maximum from the employee table. Okay, and we've taken out the employee ID, and we group it by the manager ID and the department code, and then we order it by the manager ID and the department code again. All we've done is we've just embellished upon 12.2. If you look at 12.2 and 12.3, you'll see we've just made it a little bit, we cut it a little finer. Okay? And to see that in the view, I'm going to copy it. And I'll pop over here and do the, into the create. And we'll do the query design. Now, the fun will begin when you have a series of exercises called Check Your Understanding. And that's, I think I've got 9 of them that I'm going to ask you to do on your own. And I have the directions there and the pages where you'll find them. And that's when you're going to get to, you'll get a chance to test your mettle to see if you really are grasping. Now, each of those Check Your Understandings, you'll see them in the different chapters, are embedded within examples. Okay, so it's not like it'll just be thrown out there, but what I will do is I'll progressively walk you through those different types of queries, and I think there are like 9, maybe 10 of them that I'm going to ask you to do, and some of them are a little bit challenging. Right now, working with these functions is useful. Now, where we're really going to start to see some interesting things is when we start linking tables, okay, and we'll get to that point where we're linking the tables. And just since I just mentioned this, and this is going to be our 12, I'm going to call this 12.3. So I'm going to save it as that. Okay. We'll go back here for just a moment and we'll look at the database tools. Click that. And I'm going to look at the relationships. And here we are. Now we can see the relationships between these tables. Now, the GUI on this is pretty good, and you could, if you wished, start to kind of untangle it so that you had things flowing in a somewhat logical fashion, typically a one-to-many. Okay, and you'll see those, and you'll see, for example, where you have a one-to-many here. And I'll just click on that little one between the, when I click on it, it'll say edit the relationship. There's one. And when we start doing joins, you'll see a little bit more powerful set of tools. But here we're talking about the state code. And here what we're doing is we're joining 2 tables on the basis of the state code. And the state code in one table, and that's the states table, is the primary key. In the clients table, it's a foreign key. In other words, it's a primary key from another table buried in that second table. The other terms people use is the parent and the child. The parent on the left, the child on the right. And notice here it says enforce the referential integrity. Okay, and you'll see the relationship is one-to-many. And what that's saying is I have one state of Washington, but I'll have many clients within it. I pray I will. Okay? Follow me? That's when we'll start to come to the end of the course and linking those tables. And once we link the tables, we see the table linkages, then we'll start to harvest data from the 2 tables. Then at the end of this, we're going to take a table and split it apart 2 or 3 times and harvest the data from that from that table and find some interesting results. Well, we'll go back over here for just a second, and I'm going to close that off. Okay, I'm good there. And we won't save anything. And we're back to our 12.3, okay? Now, over on page 445, they show you the 12.4, okay? And here we've got a little bit different type of query. And so let's pull that up for a moment, take a look at it. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're selecting columns, okay, and then we're going to do a count of them. You see the count function, and the asterisk is a wildcard that says count everything. And then we're going to count column 4. We're going to get the count of the items in column 5, and we're getting them from this table, section 1204. And then we're going to group them by column 2 and column 3, and then we're going to order them by. You might have heard me when we were in 1123, if you took it with me, where I said we sort, then we filter. We sort, and then we filter, okay? And I gave you some advice. It's probably for some of you 2 or 3 years ago when I gave the advice. I said, think of dating exactly in this way. Sort and filter, sort and filter. Because if you do not, you may wake up one day and look at the person across from you in the table and go, how did I get here? Who is this person? Why did I marry them? Is it wrong for me to pray that they have a fatal accident because they are Christians and they'll go to be with Jesus? Should I kill them or not? So sort and filter, sort and filter, sort and filter, okay? Just word to the wise. But if you have come here and you've already earned that coveted MS degree, you are in my prayers. All right, we're going to click Create. And we'll click Query Design. We'll close this off. And again, we'll run this, Jewel, and there it is. Now, let me say this. The code looks very simple. But what's going to happen to you when you're at work is your boss is going to come in and typically go, listen, I need you to run a report on our Northwest region. And I'm concerned about our sales levels for October through December. And I'd like you to get the totals of sales on products A, B, and C. And then also, oh, I forgot, and add the Ouija boards. Okay? And let's see. And I'd also like you to kind of give me a prediction of where things will go for each of those products. You know, kind of a little predictive thing, a forecast. That's what you'll get at work. Now, your contemporaries who aren't getting everything you're getting here will be going, and you'll be going, okay, I can do that. And you'll be that supervisor's hero. You'll be, is it the wind beneath my wings? Is that the one that everybody plays at weddings now? What do they play at weddings? You guys are in the wedding thing. I avoid them because being old and stuff and no kids in the house, people think this is going to be a big ticket item. So when I get an invite, I think, they're fishing. But you go to a wedding. Maybe some of you have to fit into a cheap tuxedo or you have to wear an ugly bridal's gown. I've never had to wear an ugly bridal gown. I hope I never get invited to one of those. The role have changed significantly the day I wear an ugly bridal gown. But if you've been a bridesmaid, you probably have had that experience. But if you have been a groomsman or best man, you've had the cheap tuxedo routine. And maybe you have, maybe you haven't. The worst thing is to be the best man and lose the ring. And I've done that. And it's Panic City. I had my friend, I lost the ring. I hadn't had it for 30 minutes and I lost it. And I thought, should I go tell him this is a sign from God? Well, I thought, no, better find the ring. So thank God I went out in the parking lot and there it was. This diamond ring that was very expensive sitting there. And I fell on my knees and I said, thank you for having mercy on me this day. Because the bride, she'd have taken me out on the spot. I'm convinced. I think I had a sense she probably had a pistol hidden inside her like a small pistol in the event that the groom didn't show? Because I think it was sketchy up to the last minute, but you never know. You'll live through those. It's 12.4, and you can see we've got the aggregate data that we want, orders that we want, filtered as we want, and we've got some anomalous data. Now, this is very typical, and I like to run this because we've got a couple of problems. One, I've got all these null data, and number two, I've got some expressions here that I didn't use an alias to explain them, and so I could have used the alias. And then they show you the results set over there at the page 446, which is what we've got. So here we are. This is, though, unfortunately, is typical of what you'll see. Usually, at just about any level. And you have so many null data in there, this is of no use to you. So you have the question of how do we handle null data? How did we get the null data in the first place? And that's where you have to go back to the table. And if you look up at the top of page 446, you're going to see, okay, a result table. But if you go back over into 445, the beginning table, here you see the problems. All types of null data. And this is where you have to be saying to someone, we need some discipline of our data input, or we're in a fix. And nulls are the bane of all of us. Null data are like when you went on a vacation with your parents and you kept saying, when are we going to get there? And your parents would say, it's soon. Okay. Now, I never had that. Mostly mine was the state police stopping my parents and going, why do you people continue to leave your child at a gas station? But hey, what can I say? Well, you've had one or two courses. You understand now. I really have a strong affinity for dog bounty hunter. I found my parents probably half a dozen times by the time I was 6 or 7 years old. They kept moving, and I'd go find them. I hope some of you know who Dog Bounty Hunter is. I've been concerned I haven't heard from him. We're Twitter friends, and the volcano scared me. What I like about Dog is he, just before he prays for the people he's going to help, he uses a whole bunch of curse words. I like that. There's kind of a duality there of man that I see. It's interesting. Well, the Dog needs to clear up his act. Now, over on 451, over on 12.6, they're going to give us a little bit different twist. So let's look at that and go over to 12.6. 12.5 produces an error message, and you can take a look at that business. And here's one of the workarounds that were provided, okay? And basically, if you go back up to 12.5, you're going to see it gets this error. We get an error message. All right, and the error message, you try to execute a query that does not include the specified expression first name as an aggregate function. All right, when you're doing aggregate data, when you're doing grouping, subtotaling, etc., you have to have some type of function that invokes the process of aggregating what's in the column. The machine says, let's start at the beginning with this. And if you walk down here, okay, you're going to see where we've got the first name, the last name, the maximum credit limit, and then we group by. Okay? Then for summarized data, they give you the same piece of help there in terms of the select and the max, and then we group by, and then we order by. So they're trying to tell you you have to have some, there has to be some order in the way you do this. And the truth is, look, if you get a big data set, you're going to hear me say this every time, and you have a big data set, and you need to do some subgrouping or grouping, throw it in Excel, all right? Put it in a pivot table. Do what you need to do to get the data. Use the database as a database. Use a spreadsheet as a spreadsheet. And that would be the best advice I could give you there as far as that goes. And then they give you some different solutions that I think are helpful, but not all that important. All righty. 12.9. Let's look at it real quickly. And I want to find my trusty text file. And where are you, my little friend? Oh, okay. Well, I'll go back over here to the Patrick materials. I'll put it back up and I'll just get it. Now, is there? I just didn't see it. So where are you? Well, I'll just walk you through it by hand. Page 456, 12.9. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to select the employee ID, simple enough. Then we're going to get a count of the lunch ID, and we're going to use a pseudonym or a column alias, and we're going to call that as number of lunches. And we're going to get that from the lunches table. Then we're going to group it by employee ID, and we're going to order it by employee ID. Now, I want you to notice something. That query is simple enough, but take a look at what we get when we extract from the beginning table down to the result table. We've extracted out a tremendous amount of data. Again, you'll hear me mention this, the law of large numbers. The more data you collect about your business, typically, the better the insights will be. If you are on top of why you're there, why you exist, etc. And that beginning and ending table there in 454 and 456, excuse me, and 457, walk you through that. Page 458, there's the query 1210, same kind of principle, and then here's the task. Count the number of lunches each employee will attend, list the employee IDs and names of all the employees. Okay, so we have the beginning table, we've got this, and that was produced by a report where we just said, give me the beginning table, select everything, and then I'm going to do the following. I'm going to get the first name, the last name. I'm going to count from that table, and I group them by employee ID, first name, last name, and I'm going to order them by the employee ID, and that's the result set that I get. It's the count there, or we get a count for the subgroups. You see that if you look at the top of page 459, excuse me, 458 and 459, 459, you're going to see the little notations there, okay, where we get those people and the future lunches that they have. A lot of times, as we work through this, you should start to be seeing what the code's going to give you, and if you have the table in front of you, you should be able to start to anticipate what the extracted set's going to look like. And notice we're always extracting. We're always getting a smaller result data set. We're going to come to a point though here where we go and we amplify things and we add data by taking tables and linking them together, or taking a table and splitting it apart. Information's is just like any other stuff. It can be subject to extraction. Okay, I go somewhere and I'm looking for a mineral, and I extract it. Oil is a good example. I go and I get some crude oil, and then I extract the value out of the crude oil. The sweeter the crude oil, or the clearer, the better the crude oil, the more expensive it is because it's easier to refine. We're now starting to come to those places where there's oil, but converting it and refining it is excessively cost prohibitive. Okay, and I want to say this. I understand it's easy at times for people to pick on the oil companies. I understand that, okay? When they have a drunken guy with an oil tanker, that's a problem waiting to happen. But think about the courage it takes for them and their shareholders to go in the middle of the North Atlantic and drop a few $1 billion literally in a hole in the ground. That's literally what they're doing. That's courage. And so those people deserve our great accolades. And yes, I know there's all kinds of things, but until we're using all these alternate sources that people are working on, we still depend upon petroleum, not only for energy, but for all kinds of products. Okay, so it's extractive. Now, information is also one in which it's expansive. You say, what do you mean? The education you get here now, what you retain with you and what you leave with, gets you ready to become an employee who will be able to take some skills and leverage them against situation after situation after situation, so you'll know and be able to do far more. So once you kind of mastered some of the essentials of Excel, you'll be able to work with spreadsheets. You'll be able to put together visualizations of data. You will have amplified your skills, and you'll become a productive member of society. You already are, but you'll even become an even more productive member of society. 1211, page 460, okay? Introduces us over to the having clause. We got a few minutes, and we'll just take a look at this, and then we'll call it a day. The having clause. Notice what we've got. And this is the bottom of 460. I use this first set, and I've got that first set of data there. Pardon me, the first piece of the query. I select the ID, the product code. I have a sum, quantity as total servings. I get from the lunch items. And then I group them by supplier and then product code. And then I use the having clause. And this is where they say, okay, it's got to have this quantity, where the quantity is sum is greater than or equal to 10. And then I order it by the supplier ID and product code. And they show us the beginning table, okay, on 461. This is one of the nice things the author does. He lets us see this kind of in slow motion, if you will. And we see the beginning table, then we see the table before the having clause is applied, and then we see the table after it's applied. And you can see the number of the result set keeps shrinking down. Okay. So the having clause is a more powerful one. I think that's pretty much it. Now, as I've said before, what you can do if you wish is we've got a while before the thing's due. You can upload what you've done today, and I'll upload something over there that has a more extensive set of these, because I know as I've worked through, I've talked to them, and I think you can take the book and look at them, or you could try and work through some more of these. That's up to you. But I think you could see and you pretty much have a good handle on what we're doing as we walk through these. We just keep building and embellishing, and that's really all that's going on. And I want to try to give you some of the business sense of this and what is and why we're doing what we're doing, other than just have you just run code and execute it, because you do need to understand it. And again, this brings us back really to the point where we're creating subgroups and we're controlling the level of summarization. So then we can start to see pieces of things. So we've worked with columns in the aggregate, and now we're chopping them up and getting subgroups. Okay? Anybody have a question that I can help you with? Anybody? Other than, is it too late to add or drop? You can drop the course now. Albeit it won't charge you much. Well, I don't know about you, but it's been big fun for me. And frankly, if it hasn't been for you, I could care less. I'm teasing you. Folks, thank you much. And I will see you next week. We're done. All righty.